Chapter 2. On Earth, he was known as Dr. Erwin, more than just a visionary scientist. He had pushed the boundaries of known science, pioneering technology that allowed consciousness to travel back in time, offering humanity a direct window into history. Visionaries and investors were drawn to him, captivated by the extraordinary potential. His promise was simple: anyone could journey into the past, witness pivotal moments, or relive personal memories. For the traveler, these experiences felt like entire lifetimes while their physical bodies rested in hypersleep, sustained by Erwin's quantum mind travel technology. But reality diverged sharply from Dr. Erwin's vision. His invention, which held the promise of profound discovery, unleashed consequences he had not foreseen. In his quest to unlock the secrets of time, Dr. Erwin inadvertently created ripples that disrupted the very fabric of reality, sending shockwaves across the cosmos with unpredictable and far-reaching consequences. The dark sphere engulfing Earth wasn't just a barrier, it was the direct consequence of Erwin's experiments. His manipulation of time had disrupted reality, and now humanity was paying the price. The sphere loomed over the planet, casting a shadow that altered the very foundation of existence. The once bustling streets were empty, devoid of human life. Yet, the environment had flourished in their absence. Trees lined the avenues, their leaves a deep, vibrant green, while flowers bloomed in wild abundance, untouched by human hands. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of nature reclaiming its place. The only sound was the gentle rustle of leaves in the wind, as though Earth itself had thrived while humanity had vanished. The dark sphere over Earth was unlike the one that shielded the Temple of Shadows on Corzin. The temple had been a refuge, a place where a few could cross the barrier and find safety. Erwin recalled how, after breaching the shield, he had been greeted by Abbot Majid, his ceremonial dark robes flowing as he smiled. "Welcome, observer. We've been waiting for you," Majid had said, his voice calm, his presence reassuring. But here on Earth there was no welcome. No one greeted him. Earth was deserted, its silence heavy. Erwin walked through the deserted city, his footsteps echoing unnaturally loud against the empty streets. The tall buildings rose above him, pristine and unblemished, as though untouched by time or disaster. Yet the stillness was palpable, no sign of movement, no hint of life. Cars remained parked neatly along the curbs, their exteriors clean and undisturbed. Traffic lights continued their cycles, shifting between green, yellow, and red for an audience that no longer existed. Storefronts, with their displays carefully arranged, advertised goods to a city whose inhabitants had vanished. Clothing racks and electronics sat behind spotless windows, waiting for customers who would never return. The sky stretched above him, a perfect expanse of cloudless blue, devoid of air cars, birds, or even the faint hum of insects. The usual sounds of life, of motion, had been replaced by a deafening silence that wrapped around him, amplifying the sense of abandonment. It was as though the world had been paused, frozen in a single moment where everything was still intact, but utterly devoid of life. Erwin felt the weight of the emptiness pressing down on him with every step, the strange dissonance between the untouched environment and the absence of humanity unsettling him deeply. The planet remained, but everything that gave it life had vanished, leaving him to walk among its hollow remnants. "Can you hear me?" Erwin called, his voice breaking the silence. "I can hear you, though the connection is weak. The city is empty, but everything looks untouched, like people just disappeared, leaving nature to flourish," Erwin's voice tinged with a blend of awe and unease. "I detect no signs of life either." Erwin pressed on, walking deeper into the city. Signs of abandonment grew more prominent. Immaculately kept parks, empty playgrounds, and gardens that appeared frozen in time. The weight of solitude settled heavily on his shoulders. His heart ached for the people who once filled these spaces with life. "Any clues as to where they might have gone?" he asked, hoping for a lead. "It's possible the people were relocated to another dimension, or a state of existence beyond our current detection capabilities." A chill ran down Erwin's spine. There must be someone. "I will search for anomalies, that might indicate the presence of survivors. Nodding, though burdened by growing uncertainty, Erwin continued through the city, each step pulling him deeper into the mystery of humanity's disappearance. Somewhere the answers waited. He was determined to find them. Pausing, he took in the world around him, so vibrant, so unchanging, yet completely devoid of life. It had to be the direct result of his experiments, the relentless pursuit of knowledge that had unintentionally triggered the anomaly and the dark sphere's emergence. His ambition had come at a devastating cost. Erwin knew exactly where he needed to go, back to his house in South Perth, the last place he had been before projecting his consciousness across the vast expanse of time and space. 2 years ago, he embarked on what he believed would be a mental journey, leaving his body to rest in a hypersleep chamber. According to his theory, and based on previous short mind travel experiences, no time should have passed. But the Nexus System was different. He had spent a lifetime there, becoming the protector of the dream civilization as the enigmatic observer. Now, back on the empty planet of his birth, the only way forward was to find his former self and uncover the answers that had eluded him. Taking a deep breath, Erwin asked, "Can you detect any anomalies at my house in South Perth?" None detected. He hesitated. A part of him didn't want to know, but he had to ask. "Any sign of my former self?" "There is no detectable sign of life at the house in South Perth." A sinking feeling gripped him. What if his body was there, lifeless, like everyone else? "Can you detect any remains?" he asked, leaving the thought unfinished. "There is no trace of any life form, just like the rest of the planet." Erwin began his walk from Elizabeth Quay towards South Perth. The familiar path, now eerily empty, stretched out before him. The tranquil landscape, once filled with life, seemed surreal in its stillness. The streets were pristine, with not a single leaf out of place. Buildings stood undisturbed, their windows gleaming in the sunlight. Parks were lush, filled with vibrant flowers in full bloom. The Swan River flowed alongside him, shimmering under the clear blue sky, reflecting a world that had become too perfect. As he crossed the Narrows Bridge, the silence deepened. The city, once alive with energy, now felt like a beautifully preserved museum exhibit, untouched by time yet devoid of its lifeblood. Erwin's mind raced with memories of the laughter, the conversations, the everyday moments that once filled these streets. Now, time seemed frozen in place, locking everything into an unsettling perfection. Passing familiar landmarks, each one a reminder of the life that had once thrived here, he felt the loss more acutely. The Perth Zoo, now empty, was overgrown with flourishing plant life. The vibrant green foliage almost mocked the lifeless enclosures that had once housed creatures from across the globe. As he approached South Perth, his pace quickened. His house, standing in the distance, felt both familiar and alien, a beacon amidst the surreal emptiness. The garden was as he remembered, blooming flowers, neatly trimmed hedges, and the scent of jasmine lingering in the air. The house itself stood immaculate, bathed in the golden light of the afternoon sun. Pausing at the gate, Erwin gathered his thoughts. This was more than a return to his home. It was a reckoning with the consequences of his life's work. He had to understand what had gone wrong and find a way to set it right. He pushed open the gate and walked up the path, each step laden with the weight of past decisions. Begin a full scan of the house. Look for any anomalies or signs of recent activity. Initiating full scan of the premises. Erwin took a deep breath before stepping inside. As he crossed the threshold, memories flooded his mind, vivid and relentless. The air inside was still, untouched by the outside world. Dust coated the furniture, but everything else remained just as it had been, frozen in time. As Erwin stood in the stillness of his deserted home, memories from his past washed over him with startling clarity. His thoughts drifted back to the early years of his career, when he had dared to propose a radical new idea in his doctoral thesis, that the fundamental underpinning of the universe was not matter, but consciousness itself. In his thesis, Erwin's former self posited that consciousness was the source of all existence, from the inert stones in distant celestial bodies to the living organisms scattered across the cosmos, including those on far-off planets. He called this primordial consciousness the cosmic mind, the origin of all life, from simple plants and animals to profoundly aware metaconscious entities. The distinction between life forms, Dr. Erwin had argued, lay in their levels of awareness. Metaconscious species, like humans, possessed advanced cognitive abilities, self-awareness, and a deep understanding of their place in the universe. In contrast, other biological entities, though alive, operated purely on instinct, lacking the higher consciousness of their metaconscious counterparts. He believed that these species were disconnected from the deeper layers of consciousness that guided the universe. Dr. Erwin further contended that metaconscious beings were inherently separated from the cosmic mind. He likened the cosmic mind to a vast ocean, with metaconscious beings existing as whirlpools, formed from the same substance yet distinct and isolated. This separation, akin to the concept of a Markov blanket, created a boundary that confined metaconscious beings within their internal thoughts and perceptions, forever cut off from the boundless expanse of the cosmic mind. He compared this dissociation to multiple identity disorder, where distinct personalities within one individual remain unaware of each other's existence. "It makes sense," Erwin murmured, lost in thought. Here he stood, grappling with multiple dissociated identities. His present self, caught between the fragments of who he once was and who he had become. Dr. Erwin, the brilliant scientist of Earth, the visionary who had pioneered mind travel, was now disconnected, almost a stranger to him. And then there was the observer, the identity he had forged across the Nexus System. Revered, feared, whispered about, he was no longer just Dr. Erwin. He had become something else entirely. The observer had seen things, lived lifetimes, and made decisions that Dr. Erwin could never have imagined. These identities, once separate, now blurred. He was all of them, yet none of them, a being tethered across time and space, struggling to reconcile the pieces of himself that had scattered across the universe. What happened here? Erwin's mind was a jumble of questions, trying to unravel the mystery from the murkiest point where it had all begun. His thoughts drifted back to a pivotal moment, his dissertation before a panel of esteemed professors, including his mentor, Dr. Albert Weber. The room had been charged with anticipation as Erwin presented his hypothesis, the core of his life's work, that matter was fundamentally a manifestation of consciousness, and the Higgs field could be manipulated to transform information into physical matter. The professors had listened intently, their quiet nods and focused expressions signaling their respect for the bold, groundbreaking ideas he had put forward. When the presentation concluded, Dr. Weber had stood, offering Erwin his hand with a proud smile, the kind that spoke volumes. It was the look of someone who recognized the magnitude of what had just been presented, a moment that seemed to mark the beginning of everything that had unfolded since. But now, standing in the aftermath of his journey, Erwin wondered if the very principles he had championed had led to the catastrophic anomaly engulfing Earth. "I'm the cause," Erwin realized, the weight of the revelation settling over him. His former self, relentless in pursuit of the unknown, had set all of this in motion. After completing his PhD, he had immersed himself in practical research, determined to prove that mind travel was not just a theory, but an achievable reality. The breakthrough had come with the release of silicon spin qubits by the European Quantum Flagship Consortium. These devices, housed in sleek, streamlined server racks with advanced built-in cooling systems, had transformed the field. The cooling systems maintained the ultra-low temperatures necessary for the qubit's delicate operation, and advances in quantum error correction had finally solved the fragility issue that had plagued quantum computing for so long. No longer vulnerable to environmental noise and thermal fluctuations, the qubits had opened the door to reliable, large-scale experiments. Unlike the bulky, cylindrical quantum computers of the past, these new systems were elegant and efficient, ushering in a new era of quantum experimentation. It was in that era, surrounded by these cutting-edge systems, that Erwin had pushed the boundaries further than anyone thought possible. Too far, perhaps. In his drive to prove that consciousness could transcend time, he had tampered with forces he hadn't fully understood. And now, he was facing the consequences. Retrocausality wasn't just a theory, it was his reality. Erwin was the embodiment of how future events could influence the past, shattering the traditional linear concept of time. The transactional interpretation of quantum mechanics had already demonstrated that particles interacted through waves traveling both forward and backward in time, instantly correlating their states across vast distances. And here he stood, living proof of it. His very existence challenged the boundaries of time, a ripple that had traveled backward, altering everything it touched. Every step he took, every choice he made, seemed to echo both forward and back, bending the fabric of reality in ways even he hadn't anticipated. He wasn't just a traveler through time, he had become a part of its very structure. His younger self had been consumed by unlocking the mysteries of time, consciousness, and existence, never pausing to consider the full consequences of his pursuit. Now, in the remnants of a world he had unknowingly altered, he was forced to confront the reality of his actions. As he walked through his home, his fingers traced the dusty surface of a table, each step heavier with the weight of the theories he had once championed. His work had opened doors to realms beyond physical reality, but it had also unleashed forces he was only beginning to understand. Somewhere, buried deep within the tangled fabric of space-time, lay the answers he now sought. Moving with purpose, Erwin ascended the staircase, each step laden with questions. His mind raced, but the house remained a quiet, still world. He paused at the doorway of his old bedroom, gazing at the neatly made bed. The room was untouched, as if frozen in time. It was a stark reminder of what he had lost: the life, the world, the people. Sleep was no longer necessary for Erwin. His transformation into an ethereal being had stripped him of physical needs, but the house, with its familiar surroundings, brought a strange comfort. It was a place to reflect, though rest itself had become irrelevant. Standing there, the weight of his isolation pressed down on him. The world outside was beautiful, but it was a hollow beauty, born from the absence of humanity. A perfection achieved at a cost he couldn't ignore. Erwin's relentless pursuit of knowledge had come with a devastating price, one he could no longer escape. Turning away, he walked back toward his private lab. The door was slightly ajar, and he pushed it open, greeted by the familiar hum of the machines. The room was an odd mix. Advanced technology coexisted with personal mementos. Monitors and equipment sat alongside books, photographs, and tokens from his life's journey. His gaze settled on a picture of his daughters. Their smiling faces, so warm and alive, felt like a distant memory mocking the cold reality around him. "I'll find you," he whispered, clutching the photograph tightly. "I'll fix this." He moved to the window, looking out over the tranquil, empty streets of South Perth. The silence was overwhelming, a stark contrast to the bustling life that had once filled these streets. His thoughts drifted to his daughters in Sydney, and the ache of wanting to see them, to hold them, gripped him. Yet deep down, he knew the truth. They were gone. Like everyone else. He was alone, the last man on Earth. The weight of it threatened to crush him, but he steeled his resolve. He walked toward the hypersleep chamber at the far end of the lab, his heart pounding. This was where he had left his physical body behind. The chamber, sleek and silver, resembled an advanced sensory deprivation unit. He pressed the glowing button at its center, and the door hissed open, releasing a cloud of white mist. For the first time in all his mind travels, he faced the unsettling prospect of seeing himself as another. As the mist cleared, Erwin approached cautiously. But the chamber was empty. He froze. Confusion and concern flooded his mind. "Run a full diagnostic on the equipment in my lab, especially the hypersleep chamber," he instructed, his voice tight. The hypersleep chamber is fully functional with no signs of malfunction. Erwin's mind raced. If his body wasn't there, where was it? Could the dark sphere have interfered with the transfer process? He asked, anxiety creeping into his voice. It is possible the dark sphere's low entropy state caused a temporal or spatial displacement, disrupting the connection between your body and consciousness. Erwin stood deep in thought. The dark sphere had introduced variables he hadn't accounted for, and now the answers eluded him. He knew he wouldn't find them here. He needed to go deeper into his memories, to trace what had gone wrong. He walked to his desk, his steps deliberate. The weight of what lay ahead was palpable. He sank into his chair, its familiar leather creaking beneath him. Taking a steadying breath, he gripped the armrests as if anchoring himself before what came next. He closed his eyes. The room faded, replaced by the stillness of his own mind. Years of practice had refined his meditative techniques. His breathing slowed as he moved through alpha, then beta, and finally into theta, a state of deep focus. The hum of waking thoughts quieted, and with it, the burdens of his decisions slipped away. Only clarity remained. In this state, Erwin accessed a part of his mind reserved for questions that logic and traditional science couldn't answer, where the intersection of the known and the unknown required a deeper approach. As a methodical scientist, he had long employed reductionism to solve complex problems. Yet there were questions no hypothesis could touch, questions about time, reality, and the effects of the future on the present. Here, in his semi-dream state, he could explore those depths as if they were vivid visions. His focus sharpened, selecting a thread of memory. South Perth, 2048. The moment when he had sent his bold proposal to Dr. Albert Weber. It wasn't just a leap in theoretical physics, it challenged the very fabric of reality. He knew then that Weber was one of the few who could grasp its implications.